Great. Can everybody hear me? Yep. So, good afternoon. My first slide is a fairly interesting one. So I actually feel a bit nostalgic today. I used to come to this theatre probably not as much as I should have done, but I enrolled at Imperial College in '97 to study biology. And then leaving there, joined Dunn Humby about 13 or so years ago. And in that time, the data landscape has changed massively. In 2003, we started work with a company called Kroger in the US, and they're the largest grocery retailer in the US. And Don McGeorge, who was the COO at the time, who's now retired, said to us, "I want you, Dunn Humby, to return me to the days of Barney Kroger in 1883. So what did he really mean by that? So in the past, when people went to their local stores, the local store manager would greet them by name. He would know who they are. He would know who their family is. He would know what products they bought. He would know when they came into the shop, what items they might typically like to try, or what recommendations he could make to them. And so what Don was really saying is, with the data and the wealth of data that we have access to today, how can you make the experience and the shopping experience of people as personal as it used to be in the world of big retail? So this is Dunn Humby's challenge today. It's part of our overall global mantra. It's making the world's experience of brands and retailers personal. And it's all about how we go about doing that using data that we have access to. So going back to when I started at Dunn Humby, and I think the whole big data landscape, while it might be a new term, it's not a new concept, and I'm sure you've probably heard about that in some of the other forums earlier this week. I used to work in our data interface team, which was really responsible for managing the inbound data, and we used to receive stacks or boxes of these 9-track tapes from some of our clients that could still only handle 1 or 10% samples of their data that we would then be in charge of loading. So this is a challenge that has existed, and it's existed in our landscape specifically since Club Card started back in '95. So really, what is big data? So for me, it's this, which is, while there are the definitions, and we just heard the 3 Vs, which I think is a good platform for people to sort of associate with. However, if you actually ask different people around the practical application of it, you'll get a different answer every single time. And why is that? And I think it's because people have different roles in the business. That some businesses actually are much more data savvy than others. But roles within a business as well, people will be exposed to data more. They'll have different perspectives on it, different levels of understanding. All that really means is actually people take something different out of what big data is and what's personal to them. So some people focus on the big picture, what's the opportunity for them, what it could mean. Some people look at very specific details within that diagram and focus in on that. But really, some it's an opportunity, but then there are others that have a less level of understanding that they really think it's a challenge to them. And so this sort of diagram is really to depict that while there are a lot of interpretations of it, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it's something that we need to work with. So the next slide is really then, where do we start with big data? And the purpose of this diagram is really to say that where we should start is actually on the hand that we've been dealt to start off with. So actually it's getting the most out of the data that's resident in your business and focusing on that. And then the true value of big data comes when it's either connecting that data into something more meaningful, or it's adding greater color or greater value to that data that you've got. So this analogy of the joker in the pack is that sometimes you'll have a hand already, but the big data actually makes it better. Or sometimes you actually have disconnected cards, and this is actually what brings it all together. So it's when to play it, and it's really therefore focusing on what you have to start off with before you start looking at where big data is going to add value to your business. So what do you need to know about a customer to be able to provide this personal experience to them? So we start on the top left, what I buy, and obviously Dunn Humby, that's something very relevant to us with all of our partnerships. But so what do I buy? What items do I buy within that? How often that is? How I shop, so that could be online, it could be in store, it could be now click and collect, which is happening more and more. Where I am, so location data, which in the past maybe wasn't as relevant, but now with real-time offers to mobile phones, etc., you don't want to be sent a coupon for a product that actually isn't in the store that you're about to go to, so it's understanding about where you are. Who I am, so the demographics that we talked about earlier, who I am, where I live, the family, all that type of thing. What I like, so the actual specific types of products that I purchase, so that could be brands, it could be pack sizes, it could be colours, it could be weights, all those different types of things around the product that actually indicate my preference. The needs and preferences are much more around what I've allowed you as a retailer or a client to give to me, or how to use my data. So actually, I might say that I want all my communications with you through email, or via direct mail, or via now mobile phone, text messaging. So it's all around the preference service, around your engagement with that company. And then the top right, all the green ones, are really around the influences of your behavior and understanding those. So what do you see, what do you hear? So that could be advertising that you're exposed to. It could be conversations that you have with your friends. Who I know, who I influence, but also who influences me. So that's around the social networking side of things. And then also, how do I make decisions? So all of these aspects of who you are really starts to help you understand, what do I know today about customers? And then based on that, where should I be focusing, or where are the opportunities for me to know more about customers? And that can then provide focus for you, rather than thinking, I need to receive every piece of data. Which are the bits that I really want to understand? Where's going to add most value to us? And that could be a commercial value, or it could be a level of understanding. So we sort of segment each of those to allow you to focus your strategies for big data acquisition. So this next one is really around the challenge of big data. And we've talked about the 3 V's with the volume, velocity, and variety. This is really saying, based on that previous diagram, where we're really focusing on the biggest challenge is connectivity of data now, and how you connect the dots between these disparate data sources. So previously we looked at Barney Kroger's store. There was only a single store probably in that town, and so everybody's shopping would be done in that same store. So it was fairly easy to understand a person's total purchasing behavior. However, today, it's not just a single store, it's different stores, different channels, different times, all of that information, just to be able to get to that same level of understanding. And how do you connect that when typically a lot of those businesses are competitive? And this could be through new technologies and the sort of disintermediation that's happening with retail data through e-wallet and mobile phones. Is that a new mechanic that we need to start thinking about as it relates to understanding total behaviors? So it's really about connecting the data rather than the data specifically itself. So what sort of data relates to each of those? And so I think we mentioned a lot of these. So there's payment data up on the top, or transactional information, the mobile phone data, product attributes, so the attributes of those products that we mentioned earlier. Excuse me. Permissions. And then the one we're going to focus on in the example is all around media data. So I think with the proliferation of digital and this sort of transition of media spend into digital channels, a lot of this sort of tries to show the analogy that really there's been a bit of a scattergun approach to engaging customers online without really understanding which of your customers engage with each of those and what message therefore should be delivered. Are the audiences different? Are they similar across those? And how we should use all of those channels, as opposed to starting with the channel and then working out the customer afterwards. So this is an example from us in the US. And based on what we were talking about earlier on, using the hand that you've got to start off with, typically with a lot of our communications, it started with direct mail. And so this is still a mechanic that's used today, and in fact with the aging demographic, it's still an extremely relevant channel to communicate to customers in. And in the US with Kroger, we would mail every quarter about 9 million of Kroger's most valuable customers. And through sourcing relevant offers from manufacturers and the targeting approach based on what you actually purchase, each of those mailings would be completely unique. So 9 million mailings were sent out. There would be 9 million different combinations of coupons based upon what you've purchased, i.e. it's bringing that personal communication to you that's relevant to you. So having seen the success where we would see redemptions of up to 50% in an industry that's generally single figures, it was, well, surely that And what we know and have learned through that is applicable in different channels as well. So where we took that to start off with was actually online advertising and working with a company called Comscore that some of you may have heard, which is an online panel, and linking their behavioral data online, what websites people are going to, what advertising they're exposed to, and how that's influencing their purchasing in-store afterwards. However, the example here is a more recent one, which is taking that same mantra and applying it to TV advertising. So we partnered with a company called TRA who sourced their set-top box data from TiVo in the US. And this is a big data challenge. They collect second-by-second viewership data, and combining that and driving understanding out of that and combining it with purchasing data is a big data challenge. So the first example we see here is actually typically people, and this still happens the majority of the time today, media is bought based on the demographic target, so age and sex typically. And what we showed was that for multiple brands and across multiple categories, actually if you focused on the people that buy your product and the people that are engaged with your brand, that you're more likely to get or grow your ROI would be more significant than if you focus typically just on the demographic target. Taking that a step further, digging into that a bit more, it showed that actually only 8% of that brand spend was reaching a target that was engaged with their brand. And as we see previously, your brand engagement dictates really your return on investment. So the greater engagement you have, the greater ROI, and they were actually missing the vast majority of their target. And taking that a step further again, is that actually, therefore, they were missing the top 20 programs where their most loyal customers were watching. And so what this really means is that we could show that using the transactional information, people could start to, and in fact, it's not, these things never change that quickly. So in fact, people will still target on demographics a lot, but they were starting to then overlay this data to try and work out how you can segment a bit further, and rather than just having a single target, start looking at purchase-based targets within an overall demographic. And that has started to show results as well. We're not actually allowed to show specific uplifts, but and the reason I've used this is going back to the philosophy of the first few slides, which is building upon what you know. So we actually took, or we identified an opportunity to start off with of using what we knew and then applying it to a new industry that wasn't typically used to using data in this way. And we had a clear goal on what we wanted to do. It was measuring the effectiveness of advertising and then influencing the targeting of that advertising in the future. And it's generated measurable value. And I think the key piece in big data at the moment is it's very easy to get distracted. And actually short-term goals and where you can show business benefit back to the people that are going to fund your R&D budget or an investment in it, it's critical that you can provide value back to them or show that it's generating new and incremental value. So this is actually coincidence that there's another beer glass on here that's now empty. But what this slide is really trying to show is, at the moment, with typical loyalty programs, the value exchange between a customer and a company is fairly simple to understand. It's, with Clubcard, for example, you're going to get a 1% value back from your purchasing there, and in return, Tesco, you will gain access to my transactional information and the information that I provide you on my application form. However, going back to this challenge of connecting data and partnering with these other companies, it's increasingly complicated and difficult for the general population to really understand how their data is being used and for what purpose. And so as we're looking to drive more value for that customer, it's increasingly important we take them on that journey and help them understand what that data is going to be used for, in what way, and in what value is going to be generated for that customer. And that's the key piece. It can't be just for the value of us, Dunn, Humby, or Tesco. It needs to be for the customer. If you do that, they're going to be much more open to sharing greater volumes of data, and there's probably other conversations or forums that go on this week about my data and putting the data in the hands of customers. If you can do this and build that trust and be a source of information as well, then customers are much more likely to come back to you in the future. And last slide, I'm not sure how many of you know what this is, but it's actually the Mars rover Opportunity, and the name of the other one's Destiny, so actually you could almost use either of them. But the reason I use this is, going back to the slide and the ink blot diagram at the beginning, it's whether it's an opportunity or a challenge. I do truly believe that big data is a huge opportunity for all of us that work in the data environment. I think typically in our business, certainly in other businesses where data exists, is that it's very much been seen as a delivery or an operational part of the business. I think big data really gives us the opportunity to be strategic and leading our business direction as opposed to always being asked or told what to do. I read an article on the BBC a couple of months ago, and it was by a photojournalist called Rick Smolan, I think his name is, and it's about how data is changing the world. And there was one bit that really stuck with me, and that was, in one single day-to-day, we're exposed to as much information as our ancestors in the 15th century were in their whole life. But as human beings, we're still thriving. And so on a conscious or subconscious level, that means that we're filtering all of that information and using it to benefit ourselves and lead our lives better. And I think as data professionals or people in this industry, I think we need to take that responsibility on for our businesses and start to become, I guess, the filter of all of this information, understanding what's valuable, what isn't, and really driving new benefit to our business. So that's it. Thank you.